I never thought I'd end up talking about this game, but because the people on my Patreon want to see me squirm, here we are. Talking about the worst fighting game I've ever played. The 3DO Interactive Multiplayer, aka the 3DO. A console made by a company led by the man who founded Electronic Arts, it burst onto the console scene in late 1993 with the ability to play PC and arcade-based titles better than the most popular consoles at the time. Until the PS1 and Sega Saturn came out 1 year later. It also boasted a suggested retail price of the average down payment on a car. Or $699. One of those is true. Adjusted for inflation, that's the equivalent of about $1,200 today. The console was only around for about 3 years, and its successor was scrapped, but it still managed to play host to over 300 games. Some of them were pretty good, like Road Rash, Return Fire, Need for Speed, and to a certain degree Gex. For the hardcores, it helped that the 3DO didn't have region locking and didn't have copy protection. So if you acquired the game data for, say, Police Knots, and you happen to have a CD burner, which around this time cost several $100s, and the write speed was so slow you had to close down every other program on your computer and then wait for several hours, you could make it work. Still, thanks to its price point and looming disc-based competition from Sega and Sony, the 3DO, much like any game console, could never have enough games. Or enough types of games. Enter Tribeca Digital Studios and their sole entry to the 3DO library, Shadow War of Succession. You may also know Tribeca from nothing else, because this is the only game they ever made. In fact, of the 16 people listed in the credits, only 2 have any games other than this one to their name. Do you know how it feels to be a guy who likes to do deep dives on video games, tracking down any extra info I can find, and barely finding anything? I mean, there's virtually nothing out there about this game aside from reviews about how bad it is. I mean, I looked up the developer, the publisher, every name in the credits, and I found virtually nothing. No. I am going to keep digging as this review goes on, and I swear on my bloody war shrine I'm going to find something. In the meantime, let's take in this intro. Observe the lime-flavored Statue of Liberty in all its majesty, overlooking the apparently frozen New York harbor. A helicopter flies between several buildings, stopping at the penthouse floor of one of them to fire several shots at about 4 frames per second, causing an explosion. What follows is a 4-sentence news wire in which every sentence has something stupid to say. Early this morning, a mysterious explosion ripped through the Storm building in Lower Manhattan. There's no mystery here, the helicopter blew it up. Initial reports are sketchy, but eyewitnesses report that the explosion may have originated from the penthouse. Did they also mention the helicopter flying at a very low altitude that was impossible not to see or hear? This has fueled speculation that Kincaid Storm, billionaire philanthropist and chairman of Storm International, was one of the victims. This doesn't seem stupid at first, but what if I told you there's no explanation for what Storm International is, and despite only addressing Kincaid by name twice, they couldn't figure out how his name should be spelled. Police refused to speculate on the cause of the explosion. Good! They shouldn't speculate, because it's obvious to anyone with eyes it was caused by the helicopter. I'm actually kind of impressed. I mean, despite having a dedicated intro to explain what's going on, they managed to not explain what's going on. The instruction book does a much better job explaining things, but also manages to make the story way less interesting. Kincaid was the leader of a criminal network called Shadow, which stands for Syndicate of Hate, Anarchy, Destruction, and Organized Warfare. Not bad, but I'm more of a Silhouette fan myself. You know, the Society of Illegitimate Lunatics harboring odd, uncontrollable emotions toward Thomas Edison. Yes, I did spend way too long coming up with that. And with his death, someone else needs to take charge. 7 people tied to him, either because they're family or they worked within Shadow, get together and kill each other until one is left to take the title of Shadow King. As far as fighting games without a tournament having a reason for people fighting each other, this is actually not too bad. You know, if you ignore how he died. Those 7, technically 8 characters are... just look at them. It's like everyone is a closet cosplay of another character. Here's Travis Kidd, that's Taki, Guile from the Street Fighter movie, the Mana Tree. Speaking of how things look, I should apologize up front because, for whatever reason, 3DO output did not deinterlace properly with my capture setup, no matter what I tried. I mean, not that it would look that much better if it captured properly. As for who these people really are, roll call! This is Anvil, a Navy SEAL. His brother worked for Shadow, but disappeared, and he's trying to figure out what happened to him. Erica is Kincaid's daughter and the Vice President of Operations for Shadow. She's out for revenge against whoever killed him. Never mind that fighting these people won't accomplish that. Carlos is an undercover FBI agent who infiltrated Shadow, but there's some question as to whether he's defected or not. Sasha is an ex-Russian agent who joined Shadow and now sees a chance to become rich and powerful with the power vacuum up top. Gabriella was the bodyguard for Kincaid. He died while she was off her shift, and now she's out to avenge him. Again, that's not how it works. Viper... Alright. Sorry. Viper is the game's attempt at Batman, a masked vigilante hero who keeps thwarting Shadow's evil plans, but just look at this guy, I mean, come on. And finally, there's Riggs, and I saved him for last for a good reason. He was the head drug dealer for Kincaid. Then they found out he was pocketing money from the deals, and Carlos executed him. The devil appeared before him and offered him a chance to return to the realm of the living as the Pale Rider, the living embodiment of death in return for all the souls of the people he killed. And yeah, he, Go to hell. Really looks like death incarnate, huh? Of course, it's unfair to criticize just Riggs for his dressed-down look, when pretty much everybody looks like they just showed up in whatever they were wearing that day. And it's not just the costumes that look wrong. It's pretty apparent that none of the actors had even a hint of martial arts or hand-to-hand combat training of any sort. Many aren't flexible enough to throw a kick above waist level. Some are so inflexible or uncoordinated, they can't even duck low enough to do a leg sweep. And those that can, do so as awkwardly as possible. Even the special moves tend to involve the actors moving as little as possible, often to hilarious effect. All I'm saying is, when I show more prowess for unarmed combat than any of your fighting game characters, you've severely fucked up. As for the controls, right shoulder and only right shoulder is block, A is punch, B is kick, C isn't listed in the instruction book and doesn't do anything, but it's used as an input for some special moves because I guess the developers felt like it had to be used for something. Beyond that, forward and punch or kick does a stronger attack, away and punch from close range is a throw, kick up close does a knee attack, back and kick is a leg sweep, and down and punch throws an uppercut. Yes, those last 3 are all Mortal Kombat moves, done with Mortal Kombat inputs. The game even has a finisher prompt that pops up at the end of fights, even though there aren't any finishers for reasons I'll get into later. There's even an unused graphic for a fatality score bonus. You know, for that score that the game doesn't keep track of. Whenever Mortal Kombat ripoffs are discussed, this game comes up a lot because of how it doesn't even attempt to hide its similarities. That being said, I'm not evaluating it as a fighting game ripping off Mortal Kombat. I'm just evaluating it as a fighting game. Which might actually make things worse. Some characters don't even have complete movesets. I would try doing, for example, a crouching kick for some characters and ended up doing an uppercut. And at this point I guess I should address the elephant in the room. Why is most of the footage just me backing up and spamming projectiles? That's because it's one of the only ways I found to win matches consistently. Close quarters combat is all but broken because of a laundry list of problems. For one, the hitboxes are literal boxes. It's pretty common for someone to flail at the air a foot or two in front of their opponent and still land a hit. It doesn't help that the hitbox is constantly active, so if you throw a kick and the opponent punches your foot, you take damage. Speaking of hitboxes, if you think Erica has an unfair advantage because the sword gives her a much longer reach, I should note that the hitbox for it only extends a few inches from the hilt. Throws are not only poorly animated, like with Riggs here, but they work from very far away, regardless of where the opponent is. I lost count of how many times I was in mid-air above a fighter and still got thrown. It's possible to chain these into each other, but the timing is pretty precise and not as consistent as projectile spamming. Why yes, I did spoil the final boss in that clip, and no, I don't care. There is no recovery time after getting hit and or knocked down. Trying to fight anyone normally usually ends with getting quote-unquote juggled by them as they spam whatever attacks they want and you have no chance to even stand up, much less block or avoid anything. Oh, but even if you could, blocking doesn't help much in the first place. Not only do you take chip damage when blocking, chip damage can knock you out. Yet another reason why projectile spamming works as well as it does. Certain attacks cause characters to move forward or backward. It's already impressive how little range virtually everyone's punches have, but even more impressive is how some characters move almost a full body length forward for certain attacks. This can cause characters to phase through each other, which may actually be helpful if you're stuck in the corner. I should be more pissed at this, but considering these Nimrods struggled to animate the fighters when they were standing still, not much surprises me at this point. Every character has 3 to 5 special moves, but you wouldn't know that if you just went by the instruction booklet, which only lists 2 per character. The exception to that is Viper, because they didn't list any of his special moves. To make him more mysterious, I guess. If an attack is done with a down left or down right input, you can't do a quarter circle or it won't work. The game also has trouble reading when you want to duck, or down inputs in general, so if your character has a move that requires pressing down,
good luck, we're all counting on you.
These special moves end up not being all that special for 2 reasons. 1, for everything but the projectiles, the hitboxes make no sense. Opponents shrugging off attacks that seem like they absolutely should have hit is commonplace here. And second, special moves get copied across multiple fighters. Everyone has a projectile. Most characters have a ground attack that radiates forward, or in Riggs' case, slides forward in the fetal position. Maybe half the characters have Sub-Zero's slide, except no one could bend down low enough to do it properly. Hell, Sasha is still standing up when she tries to do it. And then there's Anvil, who has a problem all to himself. Everyone else in this game, when they jump more than once, they land before jumping again. Anvil flies. This doesn't give him any particular advantage as much as it just looks bizarre. Not as bizarre as what an alleged developer said about this game's sales, though. Some time ago, a person claiming to be one of the game's programmers made a couple since deleted YouTube comments, giving some perspective on the planning, technical skills, and motivations of those at Tribeca Studios. They stated that the studio was way behind schedule making Shadow War of Succession. They planned to have finishing moves, but actually doing them would cause the game to crash, so they just cut them out but still left in the finisher prompt. I almost felt something resembling pity for a team that got in way over its head until I saw what else they said. Yes, it was created by a bunch of guys who knew nothing about making video games, and they laughed all the way to the bank after selling it. They were actually one of the very few game developers that made a profit that year. I sincerely doubt that last part, but it does point to something the 3DO did which helped smaller game studios, but thanks to games like this, also torpedoed its appeal to the consumer. The 3DO only collected $3 in royalties for each game sold, anywhere from 4 to 6 times lower than what Nintendo or Sega allegedly took for its games, making it easier in theory for developers and publishers to turn a profit on 3DO games. At least until you account for Tribeca having to take on publishing duties in the West, having to get someone else to publish it in Japan where most 3DOs were sold at the time, and the overall low volume of copies sold. According to a Business Wire press release in 1996, the best-selling 3DO game of all time at that point, Gex, sold just north of 500,000 copies. I know some places claim it sold over 1 million, but I'm highly skeptical of that since, given that the 3DO only sold about 2 million consoles worldwide, that would mean Gex on the 3DO had a higher proportion of players than Mario on most Nintendo consoles, including ones where it was a pack-in game at or shortly after launch. Forgive me if I find that hard to believe. Oh, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. There's more to the quote. We didn't know what the hell we were doing and did not get much support from 3DO either. Yeah, the game stank, but we didn't fail. It made money. Even if you did turn a profit, which I'm highly skeptical of, success is not solely measured in dollars, kiddo. You basically nuked your future prospects for short... Hold on. I think I might have found the contact information for 2 people who worked on Shadow War of Succession. I'm gonna reach out to them and let you know what they said.
3 weeks later.
They never responded. On the one hand, god damn it. On the other, can I really blame them for not wanting to talk about this? Oh well, at least I can still rip stuff from this guy's resume. I managed to find this description of IO360 Digital Design, the team credited with the game's photography and background art. They were based out of the same area as Tribeca Studios and founded the same year Shadow War of Succession came out, eventually becoming well known for designing websites. Based on an old resume I found online, IO360 was run out of an apartment and consisted of 5 employees: a photographer, a graphic designer, an investor, a sculptor/videographer/animator, and an architect. Just because, I guess. This does give me another idea for why Shadow War of Succession looks the way it does, though. Well, the characters at least. Have you ever seen those videos of how the actors for the first Mortal Kombat had their moves captured? They were standing still or moving at half speed or slower for most of their attacks. This helps the camera capture animations without motion blurs, but even then you would still need a good camera to properly digitize everything and know some basic animation. In Shadow War of Succession, on top of having an inept cast of fighters, the animation does nothing to make them look any better. Just imagine how this team would have animated something like Johnny Cage's Nut Punch. The thing is, this game originally looked better in some regards. There's an unused character select screen which looks a hell of a lot better than the final product. In fact, the character select screen on the back of the box looks different too. It has a dark box the characters appear in, so the background looks slightly less like a zoomed in shot of some concrete. Do you think this game came from some alternate reality where instead of games becoming more complete and functional as they go through development, this game became more incomplete and broken? It's like the Benjamin Button of video games. Even some of the backgrounds just seem wrong. This is just a photo of New York City, not much wrong with that. But then there's this bar/billiard hall. You know how these kinds of places are huge and mostly consist of empty space? Or how about the power plant, with borderline MS Paint quality smokestacks and a sign warning that you're a few blocks away from Radiac? The subway level though, that's fine. Only because someone thought to put a sign in the background saying Dirtbag Boulevard. Regardless of how some stages look, they all cause the game to run at different speeds. However you were inputting special moves on the stage before, you'll need to speed up or slow down your button presses to get them working again. Seemingly the only thing the game does right is the voiceovers. Not the acting in said voiceovers, that's pretty terrible.
My name is Erica Storm. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Really, Erica? A Princess Bride quote? You're saying this to people who had nothing to do with... whatever. What they did right was keeping in mind how these characters relate to each other. When certain characters face off, they will say a unique line of dialogue. For example, Riggs was killed by Carlos, so he says,
"You killed me once, but now I am more powerful than you can ever imagine."
And sometimes Carlos will say,
"I killed you once, I'll kill you again!"
When Erica meets Gabriella, her dad's former bodyguard, she says,
So, my father's employee is out to compensate for her failure, eh?
Then again, there's Viper, who just says this to everyone. And if you thought that was enlightening, wait until you hear his words of wisdom after fighting somebody. Of course, it doesn't help that the voice audio clips and blows out constantly. Sound as a whole is just plain wrong, with many of the mid-fight voice clips sounding nothing like the intro voices, or more like arcade sound effects than human beings. Even the music is off. I don't entirely blame the composer, as some of the riffs could possibly be salvaged, but they sound like they're coming out of a cheap MIDI keyboard. You know, the ones designed for children that have half the keys of a normal keyboard. Also, the ambient sound in some stages, like the sirens, cars driving by, or people talking or laughing, that's not a separate audio track, it's mixed into the songs. Most of the music is in 30-second chunks, and not only does it not loop, it's not designed to loop. Instead, it will just cut out completely, seemingly out of nowhere, wait a few seconds, then awkwardly start up again. I thought this was caused by a scratch on the disc, until I ripped the songs and realized, no, that's just where the song ends. And I should probably end this video soon, because I've given this game way more time and attention than it ever deserved. I hope you picked a difficulty other than beginner, because if you try playing on that, eventually the game stonewalls you and says to play on a different difficulty to face the Shadow King. Which spoils the big twist that he's still alive. When you do face him, there's this big wall of text about how the storm building is in ruins, and out of the rubble emerges a large, metallic cyborg guy. Scientists manage to extract Kincaid's brain and implant it in a new body, so now he wants his position as the leader of Shadow back. I've seen some people say you have to play on the hardest difficulty to fight him, but no, anything but beginner. Shadow King is a vaguely man-shaped blob of what's supposed to be a cyborg, outfitted with a tiny chain gun and a stumpy metal arm. His battle music is the same music that plays during the ending if you win. I'm all for recycling, but not this kind of recycling. Oh, and there's unique dialogue for everyone here too, both from the Shadow King and the other fighters.
You were overrated as a bodyguard. As a corpse, you'll do just fine.
You thought you had me, but deep inside, I still believe in the law. I'll destroy you, then I'll destroy your empire!
You were a good assassin, but what chance does Eastern Euro trash have against American steel?
At last, sweet revenge is mine!
You have to get through me to find out what really happened to your brother.
Wait, hold on. What does Viper have to say here? Anything interesting? Yeah, that's what I thought. I've seen other videos about this game discussing just how difficult the Shadow King fight is. And then I started playing the game, and got to the Shadow King, and beat him on the first try. Picked a second character, beat him on the first try. Picked a third character, beat him on the first try. And that's not a testament to my skill. I was just projectile spamming as usual. It's a testament to how wildly unbalanced this game is. Seeing as how the best way to get through the game is to back away and spam ranged attacks, there are two things that make some characters inherently better than others. The first is the projectile itself. Some characters do theirs faster than others, and some hit at different heights, have shorter cooldowns, travel longer distances, or have shorter animations before the projectile appears. Compare Sasha's slow, awkward knife toss to Carlos's shotgun blast, which somehow fires very slow bullets instead of buckshot. The second thing is teleporting. Some characters have the ability to teleport to the opposite end of the screen, creating a massive amount of distance between the fighters. Needless to say, this is perfect for projectile spamming, even if the teleport often doesn't work when you're on the right side of the screen for reasons I still don't understand. If you have a character with a fast, easy-to-input projectile move and they can teleport, even the final boss becomes really easy regardless of what difficulty you're playing on. Anvil and Carlos, for example, are two of the best, if not the best options in the game. Just for shits, I took Carlos on a trip through the hardest difficulty, and didn't lose a single round, let alone a match. Characters without a teleport, or a really slow projectile, or wind up to a projectile, have a much harder time. But there's one character who is undoubtedly the worst in the game, as they don't have a fast projectile or a teleport. Gabriella. Thanks to a shortage of continues, of which the game gives you 9, it took me 8 tries across 2 recordings to finally beat the Shadow King with her. And even then, I think I just got lucky. There is an alternative to beating the Shadow King and ending the game, but only if you have a second controller. If a second player joins during the last fight, they can select and play as the Shadow King. If they win, they can even take him through all the fights and get another ending.
At last we meet face to face. Unmasking your severed head will give me great pleasure indeed.
Wait a minute, what does the Shadow King say when he faces himself?
At last we meet face to face.
Oh, he just repeats what he says to Viper. Well, that's disappointing. Now for the endings. The Shadow King reclaims his rightful position, and eventually his organization takes control of the whole planet. This same text plays over the game over screen as well, just with a different picture. Anvil discovers that his brother Cody, an FBI operative, was working with Carlos until the Shadow King imprisoned him somewhere in South America. Anvil finds out where, storms the prison, and rescues him. Carlos? It turns out the rumors of him taking out FBI agents for the Shadow King were all... Oh, so this is what that scratch on the disc affected. The rumors were all being spread by Shadow operatives. He takes over Shadow, then proceeds to take it apart until there's nothing left. Riggs winning causes Shadow to become Satan's army. The world gets overrun by demons, and Satan appoints Riggs as the ruler of Earth. It turns out that helicopter was sent by Erica, so she could gain control... Son of a bitch. So she could gain control of Shadow. However, she expands it into a legitimate business, and given how the phrase legitimate business is used, I have my suspicions. She rules Shadow alone, pledging only to marry whoever can defeat her in battle. Sasha revels in her position as the head of Shadow, but her lack of business acumen causes it to crumble and she vanishes like a thief in the night. Gabriella has no idea how to handle killing her old boss. She runs to the Himalayas, hoping the seclusion will help her think as she decides what to do next. And finally, Viper ascends to the leader of Shadow, then almost immediately destroys it from within. He vanishes shortly thereafter, and someone actually thought sequel baiting in Viper's ending was a good idea. Wait! I told you I'd find something. And I found something. I managed to dig up an old listing for the trademark to Shadow War of Succession. Two things of note. Number 1, the filing date. This game came out in mid to late 1994, at least in Japan, and in the US sometime in 1994. Tribeca didn't even file the trademark for the game's name until the middle of May that same year, within 4 months of its release. I guess that shows how much thought went into the name and or how short the development cycle was. But check this out, object of note number 2, the trademark events. There's a lot of legalese here, but after looking up what the hell these terms meant, I realized something. The trademark for Shadow War of Succession hadn't finished registration when the game was released. Technically, rights to the name began when Tribeca first used it in commerce and or filed the application, but still, they waited until only a few months before release. It went through several parts of the approval process, but by June of 1995, it still wasn't done. Where it says NOA mailed, SOU required from applicant, that means the trademark passed the approval process and was allowed to be registered, but wouldn't be official until Tribeca responded with something called a Statement of Use within 6 months. Basically, it's a signed legal document with a processing fee and, in this case, a copy of the game being trademarked. Considering how the trademark was abandoned exactly 6 months later because no use statement was filed, I'm guessing Tribeca Studios didn't survive past June of 1995 to finish officially trademarking their own game.
And you know what? Because of that trademark listing, I figured out where Tribeca Studios was located. And because of that, I have a pretty good idea of where their name and logo came from.
Their trademark was registered out of New York City, in Lower Manhattan on Harrison Street. Apparently, Tribeca Studios operated out of a condo in this building. If you're from the New York area, you probably already know this, but Tribeca is actually the name of a neighborhood. The same neighborhood where Tribeca Studios filed the trademark. Tribeca is an abbreviation for Triangle Below Canal Street, which explains why the Tribeca Studios logo is a triangle. As for why it's 3 triangles shaped like a larger one, I think it's safe to assume they were just really big fans of the Hojo clan. Or Zelda, take your pick.
Fortunately, video game disasters don't function like real-life disasters. Otherwise, Ground Zero for Tribeca Studios would have a 6-mile exclusion zone around it.
Shadow War of Succession does just about everything wrong. It controls terribly, has 0 depth in gameplay, and from a presentation standpoint, it's a graphical mess and an audio clusterfuck. Even the 1 or 2 things it does right, it manages to immediately undermine them. Having only seen video of this, I thought it might be the kind of game that swings so far below 0 that it becomes a 10 in some regards. But no, this game just hits 0 and stays there. Regardless of what the person claiming to be a programmer might suggest, unless they made the game on a budget of Tree Fitty, what money they made couldn't have been much because, well, you still have to get the game to sell. A couple old listings of 3DO game sales included every title that sold more than 100,000 units, and shockingly, Shadow War of Succession isn't on them. And just in case someone tries playing the "it's good for the 3DO at least" card, it's not even a decent fighting game for the console it's on. You know what else you could play on the 3DO? Super Street Fighter II Turbo, Samurai Showdown, Primal Rage, even Rise of the Robots and Balls the Director's Cut are a step above this. But wait, those are all ports. Is Shadow War of Succession at least the best console-exclusive 3DO fighting game? No. Pretty Soldier Sailor Moon S still manages to stumble its way over the low bar this game sets. Even the infamous Way of the Warrior at least looks nicer and has Rob Zombie music instead of a Casio keyboard having a stroke in the background.
And such is the legacy of Shadow War of Succession, a game which briefly lived in obscurity and quickly died in infamy. Pretty much the only people who talk about it anymore are really big fans of the 3DO, people actively trying to find the worst fighting games they possibly can, and people really desperate for views on YouTube. I'll leave it to you to decide which one I am.
Boy, I know you're gonna like your present.
Shut up! Shut up! Kiss my butt! Shut up!
Go to hell! Go to hell!